I watched 5 police cars surround my house, officers with hands on weapons, because I dared to move out. Karen Whitmore, our HOA president, declared no one leaves Willowbrook without her permission. But she made one fatal mistake, underestimating who was inside that fifth patrol car. What happened next destroyed her reign of terror. This is how I fought back against the tyrant next door and uncovered her twisted empire. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Because this insanity happens everywhere in America, and what happened next will blow your mind. Karen's war began the moment my for sale sign went up, but my reason was sacred. 6 weeks ago, St. Mary's Hospital chain offered me an exclusive organic vegetable supply contract. 5 years guaranteed, enough to expand my small farm into something that could truly honor my late wife Lisa's dream. This contract wasn't just business, it was destiny calling. I stood in my backyard that morning, looking at the basil plant Lisa had left behind. Still green, still growing 3 years after cancer took her from us. Lisa had been a nurse who believed in healing through nutrition. Before she passed, she made me promise to keep growing the cleanest, healthiest vegetables possible. As sunlight hit her basil plant that morning, I swore I heard her laugh. Then Karen materialized like a ghost. The moment I hammered that for sale sign into my front lawn, I saw Karen Whitmore emerge from her house across the street like a vampire sensing fresh blood. At 52, with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer workout clothes she never actually worked out in, Karen ruled our homeowners association with an iron fist wrapped in a French manicure. Robert, she called out in that fake sweet voice that always meant trouble was coming. Surely you're not thinking of leaving our beautiful community? I explained about the hospital contract, keeping my tone polite and professional as always. Her smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in her eyes. Well, she said, examining her nails, moving can be so complicated with all our HOA regulations. I do hope you reviewed Section 12 of our bylaws about property transfers. The truth was, Karen had hated me ever since I'd won that small lawsuit against her precious HOA rules 2 years ago. She tried to ban vegetable gardens from front yards, calling them unsightly and property value destroyers. I'd fought back, proved that gardens actually increased property values, and won. Since then, I'd become her number one enemy, though she hid it behind those plastic smiles and backhanded compliments. What I didn't know was that my son Nathan had visited just the day before while off duty from his police job 3 hours away. Karen had seen him, noticed his service weapon, and filed that information away in her vindictive little brain. She'd even taken photos from her window, though I wouldn't discover this until much later. Within hours of the sign going up, Karen struck her first blow. A bright orange violation notice appeared on my door, citing my produce delivery truck for being parked in my own driveway for more than 2 hours. The fine, $500. The rule, buried somewhere in subsection 12.3 of the HOA guidelines that nobody had enforced in the decade I'd lived there. I paid it, of course, but not before recording our conversation when she came to collect. This is just the beginning, Robert, she hissed when she thought I wasn't recording. I'll make sure you never leave this place. You think you can just abandon your responsibilities to this community? Think again. Her voice dropped to a whisper that made my skin crawl. I know people, important people, and they owe me favors. Would Karen's connections be enough to trap me forever? The answer came sooner than I expected. 2 days later, things escalated dramatically. The potential buyer who'd shown serious interest in my property suddenly backed out, citing concerns about the property's history. When I pressed for details, the real estate agent reluctantly forwarded me an email from Karen sent to every resident in Willowbrook. In it, she'd accused me of being a deadbeat homeowner trying to skip out on numerous HOA debts and violations. She'd attached a list of 47 supposed infractions over 5 years, complete with Photoshop dates and fabricated evidence. The reality? I'd had exactly 2 violations in 5 years, both for my truck staying past the tower limit during harvest season. The email was a masterpiece of deception, mixing just enough truth with outrageous lies to seem believable. As I read through her fabrications, each more outrageous than the last, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Lisa's diagnosis: pure, helpless rage. This woman was destroying my chance to honor my wife's memory, to build something meaningful from our shared dream. But I remembered Lisa's words from her final days: promise me you'll never fight with fists or fury, Robert. Fight with wisdom and patience. That's how good people win. So instead of marching over to Karen's house and giving her a piece of my mind, I sat down at my computer and started documenting everything, every email, every false claim, every interaction. Because if Karen wanted a war, she was going to get one, but on my terms, not hers. What I didn't realize was that Karen had already called someone who owed her everything. And my problems were about to get much worse. The next morning brought a new catastrophe to my doorstep. The moving company I'd hired called to cancel, their manager sounding genuinely terrified on the phone. I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but we've received a legal threat from your HOA president. She says we need special permits to operate in Willowbrook, and she'll sue us for trespassing if we show up. I tried explaining that no such permits existed, that this was pure intimidation, but the damage was done. Karen had scared them off completely, leaving me to pack up 5 years of life on my own. As I hung up the phone, I heard a soft knock on my back door. Maria Rodriguez stood there, glancing nervously over her shoulder. She was a small woman in her mid-40s, flowers still dusting her dark hair from her morning baking. Maria owned the small bakery on Maple Street and served on the HOA board, though she'd been mysteriously quiet during meetings lately. Robert, we need to talk, she whispered, clutching a worn notebook to her chest. But not here. Karen has Mike watching your house. I'd seen Mike around the neighborhood for weeks now, always lurking, always watching. He drove a beat-up white van with tinted windows and had the unsettling habit of sitting in it for hours, just staring at houses. The way he looked at people, especially women, made everyone uncomfortable. Mrs. Peterson from 2 houses down told me she'd caught him going through her recycling bin at night, looking for evidence of violations he'd claimed when confronted. But we all knew better. This was a man who enjoyed having power over others, even the petty power of HOA enforcement. What Maria told me next made my blood run cold. Karen had used this exact playbook on 3 other families over the past 3 years, forcing them to sell their homes well below market value. And guess who swooped in to buy those properties? Karen's younger brother, operating under different LLC names each time. Pattern was always the same: harassment, false violations, intimidation, and then a lowball cash offer when the family was desperate to escape. I tried to fight her 2 years ago when she forced me to shut down my home bakery business, Maria continued, her voice trembling with barely contained anger. But I didn't have enough evidence. Now I do. She opened the notebook, revealing 2 years' worth of meticulous documentation. Every illegal fine, every family Karen had terrorized, all recorded in Maria's neat handwriting. But Robert, she's getting worse. Last week she told me if I didn't vote her way on the new budget, she'd burn down my bakery. She said it with a smile, like she was discussing the weather. Maria's husband was a cop, but even he said they needed solid evidence to take Karen down. Until now, she'd been too careful, too connected. But Maria thought she was finally overreaching. Emboldened by Maria's courage, I decided to fight back strategically. We developed a plan. I would continue my moving preparations, acting as bait to make Karen overreach, while Maria would secretly record everything. The next day, Karen took the bait spectacularly. She hired a towing company to remove my produce truck, claiming it was illegally parked in my own driveway. The tow truck driver arrived, took one look at the situation, and started laughing. Turns out he was one of my regular customers at the farmer's market. Mr. Thompson, your vegetables saved my diabetic wife's life, he said, unhooking my truck. No way I'm towing you for this crazy lady. Karen's face turned purple with rage as she screamed threats at both of us. You'll regret this. I'll have your business license revoked. I'll sue you into bankruptcy. That evening, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting, using her puppet board members to ram through a new temporary regulation. No homeowner could move out within 90 days of listing their property. It was completely illegal, of course, but she had enough votes from board members who owed her favors or feared her wrath. Maria tried to object, but was shouted down. In a brilliant move, though, Maria secretly live-streamed the entire meeting on the neighborhood's community page. Within minutes, 500 people were watching Karen scream at elderly residents, threaten board members, and openly admit she was targeting me specifically. Robert Thompson thinks he can just leave whenever he wants, she ranted, spittle flying from her lips. Well, I've got news for him. Nobody leaves Willowbrook without my permission. The comment section exploded with outrage. Is this even legal? One neighbor asked. Someone call the authorities, another demanded. But one comment made everyone freeze. Is that a knife in her purse? Sure enough, when Maria panned her phone camera, there was a clear outline of what looked like a switchblade in Karen's designer handbag. The meeting descended into chaos as residents started backing away from their unhinged president. Karen, realizing she was being broadcast, tried to grab Maria's phone, but Maria's husband, Sergeant Rodriguez, had taught her well. She kept filming while backing toward the exit, capturing every moment of Karen's meltdown. Turn that off. Karen shrieked. This is a private meeting. You're violating HOA privacy rules. The irony of Karen caring about privacy while violating everyone else's wasn't lost on anyone. But would this public humiliation be enough to stop her? The answer came the next morning in the most vicious way possible. I woke up to find my garden slaughtered. Traitor screamed in red paint across the soil. Tomato seedlings Lisa and I had nurtured were snapped in half, their sap bleeding into the dirt like tears. Then I saw it, a single red rose on my doorstep. Her twisted signature. Security footage showed Mike Stevens doing the deed at 3 in the morning, with Karen standing in the background directing him like some demented orchestra conductor. But the strangest part? Karen had left a note with the rose. This is what happens to people who betray the community. As I swept up the destroyed plants, trying not to think about how Lisa would have cried seeing her garden ruined, Maria texted me urgently, Robert, you need to see this tonight. Come alone. I knew it was a risk, but I also knew Maria wouldn't ask unless it was important. Whatever she discovered, it was big enough to require secrecy, and that meant it might be the key to stopping Karen once and for all. That night, I met Maria at her bakery after closing time. The smell of fresh bread couldn't mask the tension in the air as she spread dozens of documents across the flour-dusted counter. 3 months ago, I started noticing patterns in Karen's behavior. She began, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Every family she's targeted, every business she's destroyed, it all follows the same pattern. First comes the harassment, then the false violations, then something that forces them to sell cheap. But Robert, it goes deeper than just her brother buying properties. She showed me bank records, property deeds, and a web of connections that made my head spin. Karen had stolen over $150,000 from HOA funds over 4 years, using it to finance her brother's real estate purchases. But that wasn't the worst part. She'd created fake maintenance companies, billed the HOA for work never performed, and funneled that money into her personal accounts. When homeowners couldn't pay her fabricated fines, she'd place liens on their properties, forcing them into financial distress. Then her brother would swoop in with cash offers at 30% below market value. It was a perfect scam, protected by her position and the fear she instilled in anyone who might speak up. But why hasn't anyone reported this to the authorities? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Maria's laugh was bitter. Her brother-in-law is the dispatch supervisor for the police department. Every complaint against Karen mysteriously gets lost or marked as resolved without investigation. She's built a network of people who owe her favors or fear her revenge. The evidence Maria had collected was damning, but we needed more to be ironclad. We decided I would continue playing the victim while she gathered additional proof. The next morning, Karen escalated again. She called the health department, reporting that I was selling contaminated produce from my property. When the inspector arrived, I braced for the worst. Instead, he took one look at my setup and started grinning. "Mr. Thompson, I buy your tomatoes every week at the farmer's market. My wife swears they're the only ones that don't upset her stomach." Not only did he give me a clean bill of health, but he also asked to buy 10 pounds of vegetables for his family. Karen, watching from her window, looked ready to explode. Her carefully laid trap had backfired spectacularly, and I could see her typing furiously on her phone, no doubt planning her next attack. Her next move was even more desperate. Working with an authorized HOA utility contractor, which turned out to be another of her shell companies, she arranged to have my power and water cut off for emergency maintenance. In the middle of a 95-degree summer day, my house went dark. Without electricity, my automated irrigation system failed. I watched helplessly as thousands of dollars worth of carefully cultivated vegetables began wilting in the heat. The plants Lisa and I had started from seeds, the heritage varieties we'd saved for years, all dying because of one woman's vendetta. My farmers market customers called frantically, worried about their weekly orders. The hospital contract hung by a thread as I struggled to explain why I might not meet the initial delivery deadline. "Don't worry, I lied through gritted teeth. Everything's under control." The psychological warfare was taking its toll. I found myself dumping at shadows, checking locks obsessively, wondering what fresh hell Karen would unleash next. She'd stationed Mike outside my house 24/7, supposedly as neighborhood security, though all he did was photograph everyone who came to buy vegetables. Karen spread rumors that I was selling illegal substances, trying to scare away my customers. Some believed her lies and stopped coming. Others saw through her tactics, but were too afraid to get involved. The isolation was crushing, reminding me of those dark days after Lisa's death when the world felt impossibly hostile and empty. But then I'd look at her basil plant, still somehow thriving despite everything, and find the strength to continue. Lisa wouldn't have given up, and neither would I. Everything came to a head at the next HOA meeting. Karen stood before the assembled residents like a dictator addressing her subjects, announcing new emergency measures to protect property values. Among them, increased fines for arbitrary violations, mandatory approval for all home sales, and expanded powers for the HOA president to act without board consent. When Maria tried to object, Karen turned on her with vicious fury. "Sit down, Maria, before I remind everyone about your illegal bakery operation." "Oh, wait, that's right. I already shut that down, didn't I?" The threat was clear: comply or be destroyed. But Maria didn't back down. She stood taller and looked Karen straight in the eye. "Actually, Karen, I have something to share with everyone."
Maria pulled out her phone and started reading from her documentation. HOA funds missing, fake contractors, families forced from their homes. With each revelation, the room grew more restless. Karen tried to shut her down, but residents were shouting now, demanding answers. In desperation, Karen grabbed the microphone and screamed, "This is all lies. Robert Thompson and Maria Rodriguez are conspiring against me because they can't handle strong leadership." But the dam had broken. Years of fear and resentment came pouring out as neighbor after neighbor stood up to share their own stories of Karen's abuse. The meeting ended in chaos, with Karen fleeing the room. But she wasn't done yet. As she left, she pulled out her phone and made a call. "Mike, Plan B. Now." Then Maria showed me the photo that explained everything and made my blood run cold. The live stream comment that had mentioned the knife in Karen's purse had given her a new idea. If she couldn't beat us legally, maybe she could make us too afraid to fight back. I didn't know it then, But her next move would put lives in danger and finally expose the true depths of her madness. The morning after the disastrous HOA meeting, I discovered Mike Stevens had upgraded from mere surveillance to active intimidation. He'd parked his van directly across my driveway, blocking me in, while setting up what looked like a military observation post on my front lawn. When I confronted him, he sneered and flashed a laminated card. Official HOA Security, it read, complete with Karen's signature. Mrs. Whitmore hired me to monitor all suspicious activities, he drawled, his breath reeking of cheap beer despite it being 7 in the morning. And buddy, everything you do looks suspicious to me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was a man with a restraining order history, hired to stalk a law-abiding citizen trying to move house. I noticed him constantly checking his phone, typing messages with a satisfied smirk that made my skin crawl. My son Nathan called that afternoon, his voice tight with concern. Dad, I saw the video from the HOA meeting. This is getting serious. You need to file a police report. I explained about Karen's connections to the local police department, how her brother-in-law worked dispatch, and how mysteriously every complaint against Karen seemed to disappear. Then come stay with me until this blows over, Nathan urged. But I couldn't leave. The hospital contract deadline was approaching. My vegetables were dying without proper water, and abandoning the property would give Karen exactly what she wanted. Your mother wouldn't have run, I told him. Neither will I.
There was a long pause before Nathan spoke again. Then let me help. I've got some vacation days saved up. I wanted to tell him no, to keep him safe from this mess. But the truth was, I needed him. I was drowning, and my son was throwing me a lifeline. That evening, I sat down to write a letter to Lisa, something I'd done every week since she passed. My darling, I wrote, your garden is under siege. The basil you planted still grows strong, but everything else is struggling. I'm trying to be patient like you taught me, but this woman is testing every ounce of restraint I have. She's turned our dream into a battlefield. Mike's camera flash went off outside my window. He was photographing me through the glass, probably trying to catch me in some manufactured violation. The invasion of privacy was suffocating, but I forced myself to wave at him cheerfully, refusing to give him the reaction he wanted. The health inspector's surprise return visit the next day revealed Karen's latest scheme. Mr. Thompson, I'm really sorry about this, he said, looking genuinely embarrassed. I've been ordered to do a full contamination screening. Someone filed a complaint saying you're using illegal pesticides. Of course, the inspection turned up nothing harmful. I'd been growing organically since long before it was trendy. But while we were in the backyard, I noticed something odd. Karen had installed decorative concrete planters in her front garden, arranged in a perfect line facing my property. Why would someone who hated gardens suddenly develop an interest in container planting? The answer came when Mike made his daily intimidation rounds, and I saw him checking each planter carefully. Whatever Karen was planning, those planters were part of it. By Thursday, my situation had become desperate. Without water for nearly a week, half my crop was dead. The automated irrigation system I'd invested thousands in sat useless. Customers who'd relied on me for years were forced to shop elsewhere. The farmers market organizers called to ask if I was closing my stall permanently. The hospital procurement officer left 3 voicemails wondering if I could still meet their needs. Each message felt like another nail in the coffin of Lisa's dream. But the worst part was the isolation. Karen had successfully painted me as a troublemaker, someone disrupting the harmony of Willowbrook. Neighbors who used to wave now averted their eyes. The loneliness was suffocating. Only Maria still spoke to me, and even she was careful to do so when Karen wasn't watching. She's scared. Maria told me during a brief encounter at the mailbox. More scared than I've ever seen her. It's like she knows something's about to happen. That afternoon, I decided to make one last attempt at reasoning with Karen. I walked across the street, ignoring Mike's frantic photographing, and knocked on her door. She answered wearing a silk robe at 3 in the afternoon, a glass of wine in hand. Robert, she purred. Come to surrender? I kept my voice calm, channeling Lisa's patience. Karen, this has gone too far. I'm just trying to move. Why are you making this so difficult? Her mask slipped then, revealing the bitter, angry woman beneath. Because you embarrassed me. You made me look weak with your stupid lawsuit about gardens. Do you know what people said? That I couldn't even control one farmer. Me. I've run this HOA for 8 years. She caught herself, straightened up. Besides, you're violating the 90-day rule. You can't move. When I pointed out the rule was illegal and unenforceable, she laughed. Try me. I've got deeper pockets and better lawyers than you, vegetable man. I've destroyed bigger threats than you. That night, unable to sleep in my sweltering house, I sat on the porch watching Mike pretend to be on patrol. He was so focused on photographing my house that he didn't notice the unmarked car drive by slowly, the driver taking pictures of him instead. I didn't know it then, but Sergeant Rodriguez had been building his own case file ever since Karen threatened to burn down his wife's bakery. The universe was aligning forces against Karen Whitmore. She just didn't know it yet. As I finally headed inside around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Requested time off approved. See you tomorrow, Dad. Don't worry, everything's going to be okay. I wanted to believe him, but Karen had one more card to play, and it would be her most dangerous yet. That's when Maria texted me the warning that made my blood run cold. Mike's been asking everyone about your son. He knows Nathan's a cop. Karen's planning something. Be careful. Friday morning dawned with an ominous stillness that reminded me of the calm before a tornado. The heat was already oppressive by 7, and without air conditioning, my house felt like an oven. I was hand-watering what remained of my garden with bottles of water I'd bought from the store when Karen made her next move. She'd called the health department again, but this time with a different strategy. The same inspector arrived, looking absolutely furious. Mr. Thompson, I don't know what kind of people you've crossed, but someone just accused you of selling vegetables contaminated with E. coli. They provided an anonymous tip with photos. He showed me the pictures, clearly Photoshop images of my vegetables next to what looked like sewage. This is harassment, he said, shaking his head. I'm filing a report with my supervisors about abuse of the health inspection system. Also, he grinned slightly, my wife wants to know if you have any of those heirloom tomatoes left. She's been craving them all week. Even in the middle of this nightmare, human kindness could still surprise me. A small moment of compassion in the midst of Karen's campaign of terror nearly broke me. Here was a stranger showing more empathy than neighbors I'd known for years. After the inspector left with 10 pounds of assorted vegetables for his family, I tried calling Nathan to warn him about Mike's investigation. The call went straight to voicemail. Worried, I sent a text. Mike Stevens knows you're a police officer. Be careful. His response came quickly. Already handled, Dad. See you soon. But something felt wrong. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I noticed Mike's van was gone from its usual spot. Where was he? What was Karen planning now? I had the terrible feeling that we were approaching some kind of climax, that all of Karen's escalating attacks had been building to something bigger. The quiet felt dangerous, like the pause before a predator strikes. By noon, the temperature had reached 98 degrees. My house was a furnace, and I was down to my last few gallons of bottled water for the plants. That's when Karen arrived with her full entourage, my 3 neighbors she'd obviously bribed with promises of reduced HOA fees and a smirk that could have curdled milk. Robert, she announced loudly enough for the entire street to hear, you're in violation of HOA's safety regulations. A house without power or water is uninhabitable. As HOA president, I'm giving you 24 hours to restore utilities or face immediate eviction proceedings. 3 neighbors nodded like bobbleheads, clearly uncomfortable but too afraid or greedy to resist. One of them, Tom Bradley, had the decency to look ashamed. Just last year, I'd helped him build raised garden beds for his disabled wife. Now here he was, supporting the woman destroying everything I'd built. Something inside me finally snapped. 3 years of grief, weeks of harassment, and the death of Lisa's garden combined into a moment of raw emotion I couldn't control. My wife died of cancer 3 years ago. I shouted, my voice breaking. She was a nurse who believed in healing through food. Her dying wish was for me to keep growing clean, healthy vegetables. That's all I've tried to do, honor my dead wife's memory by feeding people good food, and you're destroying it all because of your ego. Tears were streaming down my face now, and I didn't care. Lisa planted that basil with her own hands 2 weeks before she died. She could barely stand, but she wanted to leave something growing, something alive. And you're killing everything she loved because I wounded your pride over a garden ordinance. The words poured out like water from a broken dam. Years of pain and frustration finally finding voice. Do you know what it's like to watch someone you love waste away? To feel helpless as cancer steals them piece by piece? Growing these vegetables was my therapy, my connection to her. And you're taking that away too. The street had gone silent. Several neighbors had come out of their houses, drawn by my outburst. Karen's smirk faltered for just a moment before hardening into something crueler. Save your sob story for someone who cares, she spat. Mental instability is just another violation as far as I'm concerned. Maybe you need professional help instead of playing in the dirt. But Maria had been filming the entire exchange from her car across the street. Within minutes, the video was online with the caption, HOA president terrorizes widower trying to honor late wife's dying wish. The video went viral within hours. Comments poured in from across the country expressing outrage and disbelief. The phrase Karen Whitmore is evil started trending locally. Local businesses began taking sides. The hardware store owner put up a sign, "We support local farmers." The coffee shop began buying my vegetables for their sandwiches, publicly announcing it on their board. Even the local news picked up the story with the headline, HOA president accused of terrorizing widower. But the most surprising support came from former HOA board members who'd resigned under mysterious circumstances. They began reaching out, sharing their own stories of Karen's manipulation and threats. My phone rang constantly with reporters wanting interviews, lawyers offering pro bono help, and neighbors apologizing for their silence. But it was too late for apologies. The damage was done, and Karen had pushed me past my breaking point. Nathan arrived that evening, parking down the street to avoid Mike's surveillance. When he hugged me, I felt 3 years of trying to be strong finally give way. I sobbed into my son's shoulder like I hadn't since the day we buried Lisa. "It's okay, Dad," he whispered. "I'm here now. We're going to fix this." He surveyed the dead plants, the damaged irrigation system, the general destruction of everything I'd built. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw his mother's determination in his eyes. "Mom would be so proud of how you fought," he said. "Now let me help you finish it." We spent the evening strategizing, but we both felt like we were being watched. Every shadow could be Mike. Every car driving by could be Karen gathering intelligence. Nathan kept checking his phone, his expression growing more concerned with each message. "Dad," he said finally, "something's not right. My colleagues back home are telling me someone's been asking questions about me, about my record, my assignments, everything." As darkness fell, Nathan and I sat on the porch, sharing memories of Lisa and trying to pretend the world wasn't falling apart around us. That's when Karen's car pulled up across the street. She sat there for a full minute, just staring at us. Then she pulled out her phone and began typing. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "Rodriguez says Karen just called the police. She's saying something about an armed intruder at your house." "Oh my God, Robert," she's pointing at Nathan. Before I could process what was happening, the night exploded with sirens. 5 police cars came screaming down our quiet street, lights blazing, sirens wailing. Officers jumped out with weapons drawn, using their cars as cover. A voice boomed through a megaphone. "Armed suspect, come out with your hands visible." Nathan immediately stood up, hands raised, his training kicking in. "Dad, stay calm," he said quietly. "Don't make any sudden moves." As spotlights blazed across our porch and officers shouted commands, I realized Karen had just played her most dangerous card yet. She'd called the police on my son, a fellow officer, claiming he was an armed intruder. The lead officer stepped forward, gun trained on Nathan, and shouted, "Sir, drop your weapon and step away from the homeowner. Do it now." Time seemed to slow as 5 police officers kept their weapons trained on my son. Nathan's hands remained steady in the air, his voice calm and clear despite the lethal tension. "I'm Officer Nathan Thompson, badge number 2847, Riverside Police Department. I'm off duty, visiting my father. My service weapon is holstered on my right hip. I'm going to move very slowly to show you my identification." The lead officer hesitated, his weapon still raised. "Don't move. We have a report of an armed intruder threatening a homeowner." From across the street, Karen's shrill voice cut through the night. "That's him. He's been stalking me. I saw him here yesterday with a gun. He's probably fake law enforcement." Her performance was Oscar-worthy, complete with trembling voice and crocodile tears. But she'd made a crucial mistake. Several of the responding officers were young, and one of them had recognized Nathan's name. The absurdity of the situation would have been laughable if it weren't so deadly. Here was my son, who'd won commendations for his community policing, being held at gunpoint because of a vindictive HOA president's lies. Nathan spoke again, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to diffusing dangerous situations. "Sergeant, I understand you're responding to a call, but please verify my identity. Officer David Martinez from your department was my training officer 3 years ago. Call him, he'll vouch for me." One of the younger officers suddenly lowered his weapon slightly. "Wait, Thompson? Aren't you the officer who got the commissioner's commendation last month? The youth outreach program." Relief flickered across several faces, but the lead officer kept his weapon raised, protocol overriding recognition. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and I found myself holding my breath, praying this wouldn't end in tragedy. That's when Sergeant Rodriguez arrived, pulling up in his personal vehicle with the kind of timing that seemed almost miraculous. "Stand down," he barked, stepping out with his badge visible. "That's Officer Thompson from Riverside. I know him personally." The lead officer finally lowered his weapon, confusion replacing aggression. "Sergeant Rodriguez, what are you doing here?" Rodriguez's expression was grim as he surveyed the scene. "Preventing a tragedy. Thompson, you can lower your hands." As Nathan slowly relaxed, Rodriguez turned to the lead officer. "Let me guess, anonymous caller reported an armed intruder?" The pieces were falling into place for everyone except Karen, who was now marching across the street, Mike trailing behind her like an attack dog. "This is ridiculous," she screeched. "He's dangerous. I have proof." But her bravado was starting to crack. She hadn't expected Rodriguez, and she definitely hadn't expected the officers to verify Nathan's identity so quickly. "Why aren't you arresting him?" Karen screamed, her face contorted with rage. "He's trespassing. He threatened me. I saw him with a gun yesterday." Mike chimed in, puffing out his chest. "That's right. I witnessed everything. This man is dangerous. I've been documenting his suspicious activities for days." Rodriguez turned to Mike with a look that could freeze hell. "Is that so? And what exactly is your name, sir?" When Mike identified himself, Rodriguez's eyes lit up with recognition. "Mike Stevens? Interesting. Aren't you currently under a restraining order that prohibits you from surveilling or photographing women without their consent?" The color drained from Mike's face as he realized his mistake. That's different," he stammered. "Karen hired me. It's a job." Rodriguez smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "So you admit to being paid to stalk and photograph people? That's conspiracy to commit harassment, Mr. Stevens. And violating a restraining order is a criminal offense." The situation was spiraling in a direction Karen hadn't anticipated. Her carefully orchestrated attack was becoming a spotlight on her own criminal behavior. Nathan, now recognized by all the officers, pulled out his phone. Sergeant Rodriguez, I think you should see this. He showed the video Maria had taken of Karen cutting off utilities to my house, the HOA meeting meltdown, and screenshots of Mike's obsessive documentation of our property. There's more, Nathan continued. Mrs. Whitmore has been systematically harassing my father, including having his utilities illegally disconnected and preventing him from moving out of the neighborhood. Karen's composure finally cracked completely. You can't do this, she screamed. I'm the HOA president. I have authority here. These people are destroying our community. She spun around wildly, pointing at neighbors who had gathered to watch the drama. You're all jealous. Jealous because I have power and you don't. I've kept property values up. I've maintained standards. And this is the thanks I get. Rodriguez stepped forward, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes hard as granite. Mrs. Whitmore, making a false police report is a serious crime. You reported an armed intruder when you knew Officer Thompson was a law enforcement officer visiting his father. Karen's response was to completely lose what remained of her sanity. He's not a real cop. This is all fake. You're all conspiring against me because I'm the only one who cares about property values. I know people, important people. You'll all lose your jobs. Then she made the mistake that sealed her fate. In her fury, she lunged at Nathan, her hands swinging toward his face. The slap connected with a sharp crack that echoed in the sudden silence. Every officer present tensed. Assaulting a police officer, even one off duty, even one from another jurisdiction, was a felony. Nathan didn't react beyond taking a step back, his training keeping him calm. But Rodriguez had seen enough. Karen Whitmore, you're under arrest for assault on a police officer, filing a false police report, and criminal harassment. As he reached for his handcuffs, Karen tried to run, but her designer heels betrayed her. She stumbled and face-planted into Lisa's murdered tomatoes. Prison Orange replaced her designer silk as cuffs snapped shut. The woman who terrorized us with fines would now scrub prison vegetable patches. Mike, seeing the writing on the wall, tried to flee in the opposite direction but managed to trip over the decorative planters Karen had installed, landing hard on the concrete driveway. The scene would have been comedic if it weren't so pathetic. Two bullies brought down by vegetables and their own arrogance. As they were loaded into separate patrol cars, I noticed something glinting in one of Karen's decorative planters. Later investigation would reveal she'd hidden recording devices in them, illegally surveilling my property for weeks. But the real shock came when Rodriguez showed me a document on his phone. Mr. Thompson, we've been investigating Mrs. Whitmore for months. Your situation gave us the final evidence we needed. But there's something else you should know. This goes much deeper than just HOA corruption. The photo the FBI agent showed me an hour later opened up a whole new chapter in this twisted saga. It was Judge Harold Morrison, a name that made several officers whistle low. He's been under investigation for 18 months, the agent explained as we stood in my living room the next morning. Real estate fraud, bribery, racketeering. Karen Whitmore's financial records led us right to him. She wasn't just stealing HOA funds. She was part of a larger conspiracy to manipulate property values across 3 counties. The scale of the corruption was staggering. Karen's brother wasn't just a passive beneficiary. He was a frontman for a judge who'd been fixing cases to force foreclosures and distress sales. The FBI had been building their case carefully, and Karen's arrest had given them the final pieces they needed. We've been watching her for months, the agent continued, but we needed her to make a big enough mistake to justify taking down the entire network. Attacking a police officer, that was the gift that kept on giving. The next few weeks passed in a blur of depositions, evidence gathering, and media attention. The story of the HOA president who terrorized a widower and tried to have his cop son arrested went viral nationally. News vans lined our street as reporters interviewed neighbors who suddenly remembered every terrible thing Karen had done. The same people who'd stood silent now competed to share their stories of her abuse. She threatened to fine me $1,000 for my daughter's chalk drawings, One mother tearfully told a reporter, said it was vandalism of HOA property. Another neighbor revealed Karen had killed their cat and blamed it on coyotes after they'd opposed her in a board vote. The stories kept coming, each more horrifying than the last. Tom Bradley, the neighbor who'd stood with Karen during her last confrontation, came to apologize personally. "I'm sorry, Robert. She promised to waive my late fees if I supported her. I've got medical bills and I was desperate, but that's no excuse for betraying a good neighbor." Maria Rodriguez emerged as the hero of Willowbrook. Her 2 years of careful documentation provided prosecutors with an airtight case against Karen. Over $150,000 in embezzled funds were traced through shell companies back to Karen's personal accounts. 37 families filed civil suits for harassment, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The HOA's insurance company, facing massive liability, forced the entire board to resign. When it came time to elect new leadership, Maria initially refused the nomination for president. "I don't want to become what we fought against," she said at the packed community meeting. But then something beautiful happened. The community stood as one, applauding and cheering until she accepted. Her first act was to void every one of Karen's ridiculous rules. The 90-day moving restriction was eliminated. The garden ban was reversed, and front yard gardens were now encouraged with a monthly prize for the best one. "We don't need laws to intimidate each other," Maria announced to thunderous applause. "We need rules that protect and support our neighbors. From now on, this HOA exists to build community, not destroy it." It was like watching a dictatorship transform into a democracy overnight. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years were suddenly sharing gardening tips and organizing block parties. The culture of fear Karen had cultivated for 8 years evaporated like morning dew under the warm sun of community solidarity. My dead garden became a community project, with neighbors showing up with water, plants, and helping hands. Within a week, it was thriving again. Lisa would have loved seeing the community come together like this. Tom Bradley built new raised beds as his way of making amends. "Your wife helped my wife," he said simply. "This is the least I can do." The trials were swift and decisive. Mike Stevens received 18 months for criminal stalking and violating his restraining order. His testimony against Karen in exchange for a lighter sentence revealed the depths of her paranoia and cruelty. She'd kept files on every resident, looking for weaknesses to exploit. She'd planned to force out anyone who opposed her, creating a neighborhood of fearful supporters. The judge called her actions a grotesque abuse of power that violated the very concept of community. Karen Whitmore was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for embezzlement, conspiracy, tax evasion, and civil rights violations. The image of her being led away in handcuffs, orange jumpsuit replacing her designer clothes, became the header photo for articles about HOA abuse nationwide. But the best part was when the judge ordered her to pay full restitution to all her victims. The woman who'd weaponized fines against others was now facing financial ruin. As for me, the settlement from the HOA's insurance allowed me to not only complete my move, but expand my plans significantly. The hospital contract was saved. St. Mary's administration had followed the story and were impressed by my persistence. Anyone who can stand up to that kind of adversity while maintaining their principles is exactly who we want as a partner, the procurement director told me. I used part of the settlement to hire several families Karen had displaced, giving them fresh starts at my new farm. The woman who tried to destroy my dream of honoring Lisa had inadvertently helped me create something even bigger, a community farm that employed victims of HOA abuse and donated fresh produce to food banks. Nathan helped me design security systems to ensure nothing like this could happen again. "Mom would be so proud," he said as we watched the first harvest come in. "You didn't just save her garden, you multiplied it." 8 months later, as I stood in my new greenhouse surrounded by thriving plants and grateful employees, Nathan forwarded me an email that made me laugh out loud. Karen had sent a letter from federal prison, written on toilet paper with what appeared to be crayon. I will return and reclaim what's mine. Nathan had forwarded it to his FBI contact with this simple note: FYI, seems she hasn't learned her lesson. The response came back within an hour. Thanks. We'll add this to her file for parole review. The emoji at the end was perfect. Even federal agents had a sense of humor about Karen's delusions. As I looked at Lisa's basil plant, now thriving in a place of honor in the greenhouse, I knew she would have loved this ending. We'd fought with wisdom and patience, just like she'd asked, and we'd won everything: justice, community, and the chance to grow something beautiful from the ashes of tyranny. The last time I drove through Willowbrook, I saw front yard gardens everywhere, neighbors chatting over fences, and children playing freely without fear of arbitrary fines. Maria had transformed the HOA from an instrument of oppression into a true homeowners association. And somewhere in a federal prison, Karen Whitmore was learning to tend a vegetable garden as part of her work assignment. Sometimes karma has a wicked sense of humor. As Lisa used to say, what you plant is what you harvest. Karen had planted fear and hatred. Lisa's basil thrived in the greenhouse as I read Karen's crayon-scrawled threat from jail on toilet paper